Okay, so in this video, we are going to be looking at characters. Okay, so how characters appear when we read about them, their mannerisms, what we're told about them, potentially what we're not told about them, and generally speaking, how characters, how people in these stories are described. And remember, as I said in the last video, everything in a book or in a movie is deliberate, you know? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share a very short video clip. It's only a couple of minutes. And I'd like you to pay attention to the bald man in the suit. And I'd like you to think about, and please do make notes, pause the video, go back, rewatch if you need to. Make notes about their character, what we learn about them. How do they look? How do they appear? How do they act? Okay.
Can I get you some coffee?
Roast beef sandwich on a roll. Meat raw as possible. Room temperature water. No ice.
Gotcha.
Do you have jalapenos?
I think he does.
11 of those, please. On the side.
11. You got it. What is that? That language, is that like Korean or something?
No.
Good. I had Asian studies at CUNY, thought I really missed something.
Okay, so thoughts on that video. What sort of thing did you come up with for that? So thinking here about how the character appears, but also sort of their mannerisms and how they act. Now, the thing about this is this can all sort of be tied together into the atmosphere of the story. So it shouldn't come as any surprise, really, that we're supposed to watch that scene and we're supposed to be asking ourselves questions. We're supposed to be wondering, well, who is this person? You know, there's little things that are included, like the fact, okay, so why is he looking at his watch? You know, why has he got those binoculars? Why doesn't he seem particularly phased when everything starts shaking? And there's other things to add to that sort of area of mystery as well. You know, how quickly he eats, what he eats, the amount of hot sauce and pepper he puts on it. And yeah, that's basically what we're looking at today. So how to create a character that is sort of engaging, interesting, that we want to know more about, and how the writer can give us clues to that character. Okay. So you should have your sort of part 4 worksheet here, the 4th worksheet. And what we've got here is we've got an extract from a book called Catch-22, where the character being described here is Major, 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 Major. Now, there's an element of sort of fairly bleak comedy to this book. It's got a lot of sort of very interesting anti-war themes and stuff like that, but he also really tries to focus on the chaos and sort of comedy that's going on here, really. Although the comedy, as I said, is very dark. It's very sort of, yeah, it's gallows humor, basically, a lot of the time. So poor old Major, his surname was Major, and his father, who is not a particularly pleasant person, gives him the first name and middle name of Major as well. So as a child, he's Major. And later on in the story, he joins the army, and due to an error, he's promoted to the rank of Major, making him Major. Now, you've got this extract here, and it's a few paragraphs long. And it's just introducing us. This is Joe Heller, who's the author, introducing us to Major. So your task for the day, your first task for the day after you've pulled this, is I would like you to read through this. And I want you to write down a few things. So firstly, I'd like you to make some notes on how he is described. So that could be what he looks like, as well as how he acts, and as well as his character in general. And I would also like you to think here about what the author wants us to take away from it. How does the author want us, the reader, to see Major? So pause the video and have a go at that now. Okay, so I mean, first off, if we look at this opening paragraph, the author wants us to understand how mediocre and boring this guy with a very bizarre name is. You know, I mean, he says some men are born mediocre, some men achieve mediocrity, and some men have mediocrity thrust upon them. And with Major, it had been all three. So obviously the author's playing off that saying, you know, of some men are born great, some men achieve greatness, and some men have greatness forced upon them. But in this case, for Major, it's mediocrity. And we are seeing here a pattern, and we're going to go a bit into language analysis here as well, because that's what we're veering into this session. Contrasts or juxtaposition. So where we see here, and people who met him were always impressed by how unimpressive he was. And you may well have noticed that the author is doing this throughout, you know, impressed by how unimpressive he was, you know. Now, if we look at the second paragraph here, we've got a lot of quite negative words here. So adjectives like sickly, for instance, unhappy as well, joyless, and disastrous, you know. So we've got an awful lot of negative descriptive words, an awful lot of negative adjectives here. So we can get from that, even without sort of taking in the text, even without understanding what the paragraph's going on about, we get from this the idea that Major is not a particularly lucky or happy person. He's unimpressive, he's very mediocre, he's not particularly lucky or happy. And moving on here, we get this idea. This is someone who things happen to. This is not an active person. This is a sort of reactive person. In some cases, he's not even reacting. He seems very shy. He seems like as a child, someone who's sort of isolated. Sheer bad luck, loses his friends. You know, I mean, we're told here that, you know, his friends just withdraw from him. They just never return. No one has anything to do with him. And again, we hear a bit more about his character coming up here really as well. So he begins to drop things and trip, so it's probably quite clumsy. He seems shy, he seems a bit hopeful. Awkwardly into a tall, strange, dreamy boy with fragile eyes and a very delicate mouth, whose tentative, broken smile lapsed instantly into hurt disorder at every fresh rejection. And as he's getting rejected a lot, we can think this probably happens quite often. So he seems very fragile. I mean, when I'm reading it, he seems very fragile. He seems very insecure, really not with himself at all, very nervous, very anxious. And this last paragraph here is quite interesting. And again, we're seeing this repetition of the sort of juxtaposition or contrast that we've had in the first paragraph. And again, we sort of see it a little bit throughout, really. You know, because he needed a friend so desperately, he never found one, for instance. But in this paragraph, it really comes to a head. So he was polite to his elders who disliked him. Whenever his elders told him to do, he did. He took them, they told him to look before he leaped, so he always looked before he leaped. So, you know, they're telling him, you know, be cautious, don't rush into things. So he doesn't. They told him to never put off to the next day what he could do the day before, and he never did. And again, we've got that nice contrast there, haven't we? How can anyone do both of those things? And again, we're getting this idea. This is someone who has something happen, has things happen to them. They're very passive, you know. These are bad things happening to them, but things just happen to them. You know, a lot of their position, this is just bad luck. You know, their entire life is just a series of bad luck. And again, we've got this nice contrast here. He was told he should not kill, so he did not kill until he got into the army. Then he was told to kill, and he killed. And again, after going through all of this bit, after describing this person who basically does what he's told by his superiors and his elders, you know, he tries to please them. We are told that his elders dislike him because he's such a flagrant non-performer, because he doesn't do what everyone else does. So yeah, again, this kind of quite melancholic, quite tragic character is being sort of drawn between us here. And again, this is sort of reflected, and again, you'll notice this quite a lot. It's called Neoplatonism. It's reflected in how he is described as a person. So what he looks like sort of reflects in some way who he is as a person. This tall, gangly, awkward person with a sort of watery expression, quite dreamy, quite away in the clouds. And again, that sort of reflects in his life and what happens to him. So what I would like you to do now is I would like you to put into practice what you've learned. And this is the final task today. I would like you to put into practice what you've learned both here and in other sessions. And I'd like you to describe, I'd like you to introduce a character for me. Okay, so looking back on our previous sessions, of course, we are going to be focusing here on the protagonist. So you're going to introduce us a protagonist and the introduction. So, you know, what they're like in their everyday life. We're going to try and show, not tell. And finally, also, we're going to be engaging all of those senses. Okay, so have a go at that.